Good morning. Let's make our way to our chairs. We're going to get started. David Jacobs. Round them up. Well, welcome to the July meeting for the North County Estate Planning Council San Diego. We're thrilled that you could be here. I know it's a hectic time with July 4th around the corner and kids are out of school and summer vacations and everything else that's going on, but glad you could make it. Great presentation today. We're continuing our Planning for Real Estate Families series, and we'll tell you more about that. Certainly many thanks go out to David Jacobs of Acumen Insurance Solutions, who does everything around the website and meeting registrations. Libby Tate in the whole registration process. Brandon Robbins and Glenn Arnold as our greeters. Roberta Robinson and Dan Wilson of Robinson and Wilson, who spearheaded our approval for the attorney CLE. Barry Levine for the Northern Trust for the CFP folks. We're sorry we missed you for the, sorry I missed last meeting, but our May social event was a great success. So certainly be looking out for the next one, which will come in the fall. Just a heads up for our next meeting, August 6th, always the first Tuesday of the month. We've got Kim Kamen, Chief Wealth Strategist and AgTech Fellow at Gresham Partners in Chicago, who will be presenting on the multifamily office introduction to family offices. She's fresh off of the Heckerling Estate Planning Institute and the Purposeful Planning Institute's Rendezvous Conference, and she'll shed light on the many broad range of services that a multifamily office provides. Other presentations at the end of this month, end of July, we've got the Purposeful Planning Institute's annual Rendezvous Conference. If you'd like some more information, let me know or check the meeting announcement email. September, we've got Lisa Rayberg, an independent fiduciary broker that is dealing with the life settlement world. Definitely a great presentation for the clients that think they don't need the life insurance. Many different alternatives out there as far as maximizing the policy value. Annual and National Association of Estate Planning Councils Advanced Estate Planning Strategies Conference is at October 20th to 24th at the Disneyland Resort. And the Hawaii Tax Institute, November 3 to 7 in Oahu. Definitely, you know, one of the top two conferences in the country. Without further ado, I want to bring up Javier Guerrero, President and CEO of Coastal Roots Farm. Can I just tell us about an upcoming event they're having?
It's actually going to be Christine this morning.
Oh, Christine. David, yeah, take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christine Spencer. Sorry, Javier could not be here. He is actually in Brazil. So good excuse. So I'm the Director of Grants and Impact for Coastal Roots Farm. I've been there about 2.5 years. Just a quick background about us. We have been a farm. We're actually where the Eki Ranch used to be, the poinsettia capital of the world. We were established in 2015. And we utilize farming in regenerative agriculture ways. So we do not till the land. We grow about 80,000 pounds of food a year, and we donate 80% of that back out into the community. And we do that in ways through distribution partners, places like Vista Community Clinic, tribal reservations, Community Resource Center. We also have a pay what you can farm stand twice a week, where people can actually receive up to $30 free of food, which we also have chickens. So we have produce, herbs, and eggs. And we have a very vibrant farm stand as well. So if you ever want to come, it's on Thursdays and Sundays, 10 to 3. And we're on Saxony Road, right across the street from the Ecke YMCA. We also have a very robust STEM education program. Last year, we had 10,300 youth come to our farm. 50% of those students and youth actually came free of charge. So we basically give them a scholarship and provide free bus transportation. We have a lot of partnerships with school districts like Escondido Union School District, Carlsbad Unified, Oceanside. We're trying to really expose youth to not just farming, but STEM education and soil and climate justice. And it's how important it is. We have an after-school program. We have a farm camp. We have farm internships where we work with high schools to provide education for youth who not just want to become a farmer, but any kind of ag career or an outdoor education. So and if anybody has any questions after, please come and talk to me. I'd love for anyone to come out and visit and learn more about us. What I'm here today, though, is to talk about really fast are some events that we have this summer. We are very excited to be involved with the community and expose everybody to not only farming, but what's important about farming, regenerative agriculture, climate justice. We're very huge fans of that. So the first one I have is Farm Film and Music Series. It's a series of 5 films. And this next one that's coming up is which, if you want to go to the next slide, sorry, is Women's Work. It's the untold story of America's female farmers. We actually have one of our farmers who actually has a cameo in here. But what these Farm Film and Music Series does is we bring the community out, you register, you sit out underneath the stars, you hear a panel of experts about each topic. So this one will be a panel of female farmers talking about their expertise. And then you watch the film underneath the stars on this very large screen. You can bring any kind of drinks you want, any kind of food, and you sit there and you really just have a chance to be with each other, sit outside in Encinitas and watch these amazing films. This is an amazing film because we do have female farmers on our farm, and we do really like to support our female farmers. And again, one of our farmers is in the film. So we're really excited about that. And if you scan any of these codes, they'll take you directly to the site to do this. You can also go to coastalrootsfarm.org. And you'll see under events, and you just, if you click on the top part, events, it'll come down with all our events coming up. So that's our first one this summer. And then our next one is our Farm to Table Dinner Series. This one's really exciting. You do pay $100, but what you get for the $100 is each different farm to table dinner has a different farm to table chef. So the chef actually harvests the produce from our fields and cooks on an outdoor kitchen. We have a coastal kitchen, full kitchen outdoors. So, and then you sit, this is actually a photo of one of ours, and you sit there, you have wine pairings, you have a multi-course dinner, and then you just all come together as a community. You sit, you eat amazing food, you drink wine, and it's giving back to the community, but it's really just being involved into the community. And it's an amazing, if you have time this summer, it's an amazing thing. The next one is actually July 21st, this on Sunday. So in a couple Sundays from now. And it's really exciting. So next is Chef Christina. A lot of people know her. She's an amazing chef. She does an amazing thing. You can see our coastal kitchens right there behind these people. She literally cooks right there on site. And the meals that come out are absolutely phenomenal. So again, there's a scan code right here. If not, please just go to coastalrootsfarm.org, and you can also sign up that way, or ask me any questions if you need. And our next one is Cultivating Impact Mixer. So our Cultivating Impact Mixer is very, very unique. So Blair's Search Partners came to the farm, asked Javier, our president and CEO, I want to start mixing funders with nonprofits. So we decided to come up with this. And so it's at the farm. Our next one is actually on July 22nd from 4:30 to 7:30. Anybody is invited, and it's just a time to mingle together, to talk. And it's really helpful for nonprofits to be able to talk to people, individual donors, corporate donors, foundations, and it's a chance for everyone just to talk together and realize the impact that they're having. I've listened to a lot of foundations who didn't even know some of these nonprofits exist. And we have wonderful sponsors. We're always looking for new sponsors, but it's very unique. We do this every 3 months. So again, Monday, July 22nd is our next one. Anybody can go to this. And it's really a good introduction also to the farm. It's kind of like an inside backhand way to see a kind of a tour. We have a lot of staff there who can answer a lot of questions and provide a lot of insight. Okay, this is more photos from our last couple of cultivating impact mixers. Again, here's our scan code. You can also go to coastalrootsfarm.org. But what we're trying to showcase in our events is really bringing the community together as one. It doesn't matter if you're a funder. It doesn't matter if you're just interested in farming. It doesn't matter if you need food. We're trying to bring everybody together, and that's what's really important about Coastal Roots Farm. So the last one is we actually have a fundraising campaign. And so summer's actually the 3 months out of the year where we're growing the most food, but we're also giving out the most food. A lot of families are out for the summer. They don't have the money to produce, to provide for produce, things like that. So we need to raise about 200 more thousand between now and the end of September. We are giving out about 30,000 more pounds of food. We're feeding about 15,000 more people. So if you feel it in your heart, we'd love for you to make a donation. If you're a part of a corporation, a company, we would love for you to become a corporate partner or sponsor an event. It would be amazing. And I do have flyers here too for that campaign if anyone's interested. So thank you so much. I appreciate it, everything you do.
Thanks, Christine. This highlights why we started the nonprofit spotlight. Thanks to RJ Kelly for thinking of that. Want to have Pete Tentler say a few words about our trifectas. Always great events to be a part of. For those that are Zooming in, email me as soon as you can after the meeting, and we'll get you connected to a trifecta.
Thank you, Bill. I also gave my card to Brandon. So Brandon, if you could put my email in the chat as well as Bill's, that would be great. Those who've been participating in the trifecta have been getting a lot of good feedback. We're meeting interesting people. We had no idea we had this connection. Very happy with the trifectas and the turnout. Occasionally, I've been hearing people say, "Well, he showed up, but she didn't show up, or he didn't show up." And it turns out that that person said, "Well, we really don't have anything in common about business-wise." You're really missing out by doing that on so many different occasions, because you never know what that synergy might be with other people. Plus, if you don't show up to the trifecta, do you think you're going to get a referral from that person and make them look bad? So please, it's not that much of an effort. Happy for anyone to give any feedback or any response on that. So we'll start here over with Paul Hine and pass it around the table. Thanks.
Thanks, Pete. I mean, it really does allow us to get to know people better. And it's really more driven by what are you working on versus what colleges you went to. So it really helps illustrate why I want to call Brandon or whoever. Without any further ado, I want to introduce our speakers, Robert Vallera of Voight Real Estate and David Tarquin of Oka Real Estate, presenting on building investment property portfolios, the motivation, strategies, and tactics of successful families. Robert, as you know, is part of the planning team for the Planning for Real Estate Families series. He's a multifamily expert. David is a giant real estate expert, very analytical, CFA, works with a number of I'll say billionaire families on real estate investing, and you're going to get a deep dive into how they both look at properties. I think it'll come out in their presentation just who they are. So without any further ado, Robert and David.
Am I live, Brandon?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Well, welcome this morning. We're really happy to be here. I think this first slide, the cover slide, really has a kind of a cool illustration. There's a 16 unit building down in Mission Beach I'm currently marketing that was owned by a woman who was a hairdresser and her husband was an aerospace engineer. So how did they come to own the largest beachfront apartment building in Mission Beach? And we're going to dive into that today, and you'll be able to understand how a lot of real estate investors get started investing, and then how they build portfolios over time. Over a 40-year period, I've seen a number of investors go from scrambling to try to come up with $100,000 for a down payment to getting to the point where they're well over $100 million in net worth, and in some cases up over $1 billion. So this is the world of private real estate. Just real quickly, I do want to point out, I do work at Voigt Real Estate. We're a full service brokerage firm, and Brandon, there we go. I've got two associates here today that I'm very pleased to say they're not just associates of mine, but they're also partners, and the senior brokers at Voigt own the firm. Glenn Arnold and Brian Mulvaney, I think most of you know them. They specialize in different aspects of commercial properties. Next slide, Brandon. When I got in the business back in the 1980s, I came into the business with an advanced degree in real estate economics. That was pretty darn rare back then. I'd have people, question me about that. Like, okay, you've got an advanced degree. Why did you go into real estate? It's no longer rare. And real estate's become a much more sophisticated field of investment, and it has drawn a large number of really bright people with some very sophisticated training, one of whom is sitting next to me this morning. Next slide. So I'm going to be drawing on generalizations from what I've observed over a 40-year timeline of meeting investors, getting to know them, working with them, representing them in transactions, and watching them build their portfolios. And there's certain patterns that come out over time. These are generalizations. You will find plenty of exceptions to the rule, but I think the generalizations are very informative. Who gets into real estate investing and tends to do well there? Definitely small business owners who have unrelated businesses or maybe only marginally related businesses. Met with a gentleman last week who he sells flooring, carpets, vinyl strip flooring. He's probably the largest provider of flooring to the apartment industry in San Diego County. So think about how much flooring that is. Little wonder he could give me an all-cash offer on a $6.5 million apartment complex. We also have a lot of real estate professionals who get into it. Brokers, lenders, people, building contractors, architects. We have the classic example of Jonathan Siegel here in San Diego, a master architect who got to the point where he didn't have to put up with clients ruining his designs anymore because he only designs for himself and builds it and has done an exceptional job. That's someone who got into it from a related field. We have high income professionals. Years ago, before the Tax Reform Act of 1986, there's a lot of doctors. Don't see so many doctors anymore. Part of it is that they're no longer in general have as large of incomes as they had adjusted for inflation as they did back then. But also we've got a lot of tech and biotech people who have come into money and want to diversify out of tech. So we see them buying properties. And then that final category, sophisticated, younger, I called them real estate bulls with specialized education and work experience. We have 3 universities here in San Diego, at least 3, that are turning out young people who have specialized training in real estate. San Diego State, USD, and now UCSD are all offering degrees in real estate. And this is being studied both at the undergraduate and graduate level. And then I shouldn't forget Point Loma Nazarene as well. So one of those younger real estate bulls with very specialized education and work experience who has gotten heavily involved in investing, as I said, seated right next to me. So what are typical stages in the investment life cycle? As people begin making their initial investments. So early in their career, they're not so much motivated by cash flow. They're going after growth. And this is typical of the way, if you're a money manager, wealth manager, it's what you see in the way people invest in securities. When you're young, you're going after capital gains. Your income's going to be going up over time. You really don't need to be spending that income coming from your investments. You're better off with a more leveraged position and going after the long-term capital gains. You have a high tolerance for risk, leverage, and potential volatility. Some of that is youthful adventureness and being aggressive when they're young. A good chunk of it is lack of awareness of what we call the unknown unknowns. If you ask them, you're taking a lot of risk. Yeah, I'm comfortable doing that. Well, do you fully understand all the risks you're taking? Oh, yeah. Then they go through their first recession, right? Or their first market correction. So, the Achilles heel of the young investor is frequently weak understanding of market cycles. And I've seen a number of investors over the years come out of the gate hot and heavy, using high leverage and building wealth very quickly. I'm talking about within one market cycle, going from zero to tens of millions of dollars in net worth. They're able to do that because they're very aggressive and they're taking a lot of risk, which they may or may not understand. And every market cycle, you see some of them run it over the cliff. They just don't know when to put on the brakes. One of the big 6 condo converters back in the first decade of this century, during the bubble years, there were 6 condo converters who were very aggressive in San Diego. They got into the market early, converting apartments and selling them as condos during those bubble years. And one of the fellows, he was in his early 30s. We're talking 33, 34 years old, maybe. Looked wonderful while everything was going up. And when the crash hit, there were about $300 million in losses. So, it's just the classic not knowing when to put on the brakes. The Carlyle Group, the private equity firm, they got stung with a lot of those losses. So early career investment patterns. Next slide. Leveraged acquisitions. Some of that is because younger investors just don't have much money. I was one of them. I think my first deal I did was 3% down. I don't think I was above 10% down on my first 5 acquisitions. Frequently relying on friends and family to raise investment capital. The higher cap rate submarkets, Okay, so these are markets that provide a better cash yield. So think about working class neighborhoods, lower income neighborhoods, neighborhoods where I mentioned East County to David with some properties I had listed recently, and he said, no, thanks. I don't want to have to chase rents. So these markets aren't necessarily the most desirable to own property in, but they allow you to get in with much more leverage than buying in what we would call a B neighborhood, a Pacific Beach or a Hillcrest. Shorter holding periods. A lot of them are getting in doing what we call value add plays, going in fixing up properties to create value and basically force that appreciation sooner rather than later. And then using Section 1031 exchanges, which we talked about here, I think in the December meeting, to leverage themselves up. Their portfolios are still small and manageable. They might be doing self-management. But let's see what happens. Next slide. We start getting into mid-career. So these are investors who still have a lot of runway. They might be in their mid-30s through mid-50s. They're still primarily motivated by capital appreciation, not ready to retire yet, not necessarily wanting to spend any cash flow, frequently reinvesting all the cash flow from their apartments, either into their existing buildings to fix them up or using it as a cushion to move on into the next investment. But they do tend to have greater market cycle awareness. By now they've been through a recession or two, and they understand you don't want to be fully exposed, late in the stages of a growth cycle. And then there's some recognition that positive cash flows can help moderate risk. Next slide, Brandon. So mid-career, they probably will continue the value add when they can find it, but they're beginning to do some diversification within the real estate sector. Frequently, they'll be holding some more moderately leveraged properties that provide them with steady cash flow. While they might not be spending that cash flow, they might be investing it. They understand provides them with some margin for safety, having positive cash flows on some properties, because when you have renovation projects or development projects going on, those are properties are typically not cash flowing, if anything, in negative cash flow during that time frame. And so they need something to help support those more active ventures. To the extent they've been able to build up a capital base, we then see investors kind of branch off and go two different directions. Some of them will say, I'm done having partners. I just want to run my own show. I don't want to be answering to anyone. I don't want the administrative overhead of having partners. I'm just going to do what I can do with my own capital now. And they have a large enough capital base that they can acquire properties without outside funds, outside equity funds. Obviously, they're getting mortgages. Some of them, however, will go the opposite direction. They realize, okay, I've developed expertise that is marketable. There's people who need the specialized real estate expertise that I have. There's people who want to be passive investors. They don't have the expertise themselves, but they want to invest with someone who has a good track record. And so some of the investors will see, and I think it's the minority, will choose to build an investment company, whether it's Orca Investments. Mark Lieberman with MG Properties is one who's built up a 25 or 28,000 unit portfolio of syndicated properties. Mark started out handling his own eightplexes back in about 1989, 1990, and has built it up from there. So as far as property management, same thing, kind of a bifurcation where they either build an in-house management firm to run their properties, or they outsource to third parties because they just get to the point where there's too many balls in the air to do it all themselves. Next slide. So late career mindset and motivations. What are these investors thinking? Now it starts becoming about cash flow. Okay, we've worked hard for a lot of years, built up substantial equity, and it's time to start enjoying it, maybe do some travel, maybe tap the brakes. I sometimes will hear them say, you know, I have enough property, I have enough units. Risk level is dropping. Once again, wealth managers will recognize this trend. It's classic stage of life cycle for investors. Reluctance to seek longer 5 to 10 year upside plays. I have an example of that playing out right now. I have a client who some years ago acquired property, the corner of intersection of two major roads here in San Diego, purchased a portion of a retail center, all single story. But at this key intersection on that size of a piece of land, this property is severely underutilized at this point. The investor is getting into his 70s. It looks as though this property is going to be ripe for redevelopment some point in the next market cycle. Construction costs are very high right now. We haven't yet fully adjusted to today's interest rates, which, you know, doubled over the last 2 years. So we're seeing a lull in development projects that are entering the pipeline. You're still going to see some projects that are in the pipeline that have been permitted break ground later this year, but we're going to see a slowdown next year. So next market cycle, this property is going to be ripe for development. But what does next market cycle mean? And I think it's, you know, 5 years out, definitely within 10, but I'd be hesitant to gamble on it being less than 5 years out. This investor is selling the property. No coincidence, the buyer is 45 years old. Sophisticated player, owns a lot of commercial property in the area. He understands what's going on in San Diego. He understands that even though the site was originally zoned commercial, City of San Diego will allow up to 6 stories residential development. So this is multifamily. So this center is going to go from being a strip retail center to some commercial on the ground floor, and then high density apartments above. And if you go into Hillcrest, you go into North Park, you see this type of development going up today. And this is one of San Diego's responses to the housing shortage. Close in urban areas on major thoroughfares, allowing the higher density development. So next slide. Late career, retirement, family transition. Okay, now we're getting into estate planning council themes here. I'm going to pick on one of my kayak fishing buddies. He's Gen 1. He's the patriarch. This guy grew up on a chicken ranch down in Guaymas, Mexico. Was fortunate enough to get up into the United States, and he began investing in barrio apartments back in the early 1990s. He made a lot of money buying a lot of really run-down properties in rough neighborhoods in San Diego and cleaning them up, doing a really good job. He was given some awards by like 10 News, I remember, you know, Citizen of the Month type of award for the work he was doing, cleaning up and providing apartments and providing good, clean housing for hardworking people of modest means. His children have grown up in Rancho Santa Fe. Do they want to go down and run apartments in City Heights? No. You all know that one, right? So he's going through the process of doing 1031 exchanges to move that equity. He's a firm believer in apartment investing, but he said, you know, I've got to make this manageable for the next generation and face the reality of what they're going to be willing to get engaged with. He said, if I'm going to keep this portfolio together, I've got to reposition it. And so this is classic. We see people later stage of life cycle transition up into stronger neighborhoods that are less management intensive, where they don't have to go chase those rents. And so we see that kind of transition. Sometimes if they have had in-house management and it just becomes administratively too much for them to oversee the personnel, especially if they don't have heirs that are interested in running the business hands-on, then we'll see these portfolios eventually transition to third-party professional management. And then we'll also see gradual sales of properties that include non-family partners to reduce down management and administrative responsibilities. You know, you have partners, you have a fiduciary responsibility to those partners, and you need to be on your game. And as people get older, at a certain point, there might be a tendency to say, you know what, we've done a good job. It's time to declare success and close down the partnership. Either gets to be a point where, you know, earlier in your life, you'll trade time for money. And then what happens later in your life? It's the opposite, right? You know, I've seen that, you know, with my own portfolio. My wife, Holly, is here with us this morning, and she's been involved for decades, since the get-go. Holly's a former real estate agent. We've built up a portfolio together, but some of the properties are in more complicated partnership structures. And at a certain point, you know, we'll probably transition out of that. I've got a lengthy letter of instruction with my estate documents talking about different properties, what can be done with them. And, you know, 5 years ago, it said, hold everything. Don't sell any of the properties. You know, but at this stage of the game, I look at it and I went in and modified that instruction. And I said, you know, the ones with the more complicated partnership structures, if you decide the time's more valuable than, you know, the additional income that comes from overseeing that, it's okay to transition out and have a more peaceful life as we get into our golden years. So some of this is just, you know, classic stage of life cycle. I want to encourage you, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to just put up a hand. We don't have to wait for the Q&A at the end. So at this point, I want to kick it over to David Tarquin. David is a CFA. I first noticed him when he beat me on an acquisition.
Which one was that?
Might have been, was it a Coda property, a Bob Coda property that you picked up in University Heights, like a 16 or an 18 unit?
Yeah, the one on Mississippi.
Yeah, the one on
Yes.
Mississippi. Yeah.
That one's for sale soon.
Yeah, but I wanted it the price where you bought it.
It was a good buy.
So I was like, okay, who is this guy? And then I started looking around and I realized this guy's making some good acquisitions here in San Diego. And, you know, I got to give this guy a call. And little did I know at the time, now David has since shaved, but, and if you want to get a good laugh, go to his website and look at his promo photo in the website, because it's all pre-beard. But when I met David, he was traveling incognito. if he's out and about town, you'd have no idea. This is a sophisticated CFA with substantial experience advising CalPERS on their real estate investments. Probably half the people in this room or more have read The Millionaire Next Door. And David has it down. At the time I met him, he was the Billy Gibbons of San Diego real estate. If any of you guys know the ZZ Top band with the big beards. So anyhow, David's sophisticated, very knowledgeable. He does a superb job networking with key players in the San Diego apartment market. David might know more about what's going on behind the scenes in the San Diego apartment market than anyone else in San Diego. And that is saying a lot. He has networked with key players. He's networked with key brokers, such as myself. And so he gets the inside skinny from me, but then he gets it from all my competitors as well. And those guys, you know, we're all kind of collegial and we're friendly, but, you know, we don't really share the goods with each other, but we all share it with David. So he's a very good information aggregator. And he's not a jack of all trades in real estate. You know, you're not going to go to David to invest in a triple net in Kalamazoo, Michigan, or Yazoo, Mississippi. You go to David because he's bringing value to the table because of what he knows is going on in this niche. And unlike the securities markets, where it's illegal to trade on inside information and unethical, in real estate, the person with the best information wins. And if that's a lot of inside information that you've picked up talking to other key players in the market, it's perfectly ethical and legal for you to use that information. And you can drive superior returns by being the best informed player at the table. So let me turn the mic over to the best informed player at the table.
Nice to meet everybody. Can you guys hear me okay? My name's Dave. I started to work back in 2019 after a career in institutional real estate. In my early 30s, I wrote a white paper and subsequently raised a separate account for CalPERS and ended up winning that account and managing it for about 5 years. At that time, I worked for a gentleman who required us to wear a suit and tie every day and was clean shaven every day. So after a couple years, it was just too much. And I decided to go do my own thing and grow a beard and wear flip-flops and board shorts every day and become a real estate investor. And started off in Long Beach, and that was rough. I mean, you really understand city politics when you go into LA County, and bought a small 12-unit building, ran into some severe rent control issues, made out of it unscathed, you know, beat pro forma, but a lot of what I do now is focusing on political risk and headline risk and what's happening in the environment. So I left LA County real quickly and came down to San Diego County, and I'm glad I did. San Diego is an interesting market where you have a lot of young Midwest kids graduating college, and they drive their beat up 1999 Civic across the country, and it, you know, craps out in Pacific Beach. And they're a bartender for 3 to 4 years, and then they go off and actually use their degree and make good money. And that's why it's such a great apartment market. There's high barrier entry to owning a home here. Rents are ecstatically high. I mean, my PB buildings for a 1-bedroom are $3,300. For a 2-bedroom, they're approaching $3,800. I just rented one to a couple, and they both are, you know, they make 6 figures and they both work in tech. One works for Amazon and the other one was a medical startup. But that's why I'm primarily focused on San Diego housing, and you'd consider me a zip code snob. when Robert mentioned chasing rents, it means chasing collections. I like to see when I wake up on the first that all the ACH payments were completed. And, you know, my third-party management company doesn't have to make any phone calls. You were talking about people redistributing their portfolio from, you know, secondary to tertiary markets. And with Orca, I'm their kind of end vehicle. I take well-located product. I polish it out, redo any of the, oh, it's a little echoey. Maybe I'll scoot over a little bit.
Turn this off so it gets feedback.
I end up polishing it out, redoing the systems, roof, new electrical, new plumbing, and then I sell it to these older gentlemen because they understand that, hey, I've already made my money. Let me go into a more insular market where, you know, the cash flow is okay, but the appreciation is much better. My investment returns are heavy on appreciation and very low on cash yield. That's just the way that I was trained. And I think when cap rates start moving up, the insular markets do not get affected as much. Across the nation, I'm sure glad that I'm not in the Midwest right now. You know, buying 4.5 cap deals on floaters, and you know, you're there, it's a bloodbath along the Mississippi. And I buy in markets that are supply constrained. Phoenix is a market that is getting hammered with 18% coming online right now, where San Diego, I mean, we have like 2.8% coming online in supply, and most of it's focused in North Park. Massive buildings that I don't agree with because they're underparked or they have no parking and they're tiny. And I think it's unusable housing, but if it pencils for them. You go on the next page. Here's a couple of examples. Up, next one. Here's a couple of examples that I do or that I've done in the past. Every single one of these were bought by individuals in their later real estate cycle. If I'm selling to someone at my age, I'm 40 or younger, I'm not doing my job right. And that was probably not a good asset to buy to begin with. But I've had 5 transactions sold. I saw spreads thinning, and when I'm talking about thinning spreads, it's where you could stabilize an apartment building and where you could exit on a cap rate basis. And in 2022, spreads were thinning very, very rapidly because individuals were buying at prices that were well above the intrinsic value of the asset. And they were able to do that with a lot of leverage and very low interest rates. And they quickly found out 18 months later that they were not in a good position. So right now I'm waiting to look for opportunities where these individuals need help in exiting an asset. Yes, sir. Sure. Oh, sure. So real estate, he was asking about, can you explain what spreads are? There's a lot of vernacular in real estate, but essentially, real estate trades off of rates, similar to a bond. And what I like to do is I buy low yielding bonds and I improve the yield by increasing the rate. And then when I go to sell the building, I try to sell it at the lowest rate possible because there's cap rate compression. And when I was talking about spreads, it's to where can you get that bond to and where you could exit at. For me, I need to buy at 150 basis points of spread. In 2022, the spreads were going sub 100. And in my model, it wasn't working. And the only reason why people were buying is because they were essentially engineering a return through a lot of cheap debt. And that's where we're at right now. And a lot of that cheap debt is rolling over. And now they're looking at, hey, I bought it at a 4% interest rate. Today it's a 6.5, and they're either going to have to put a couple $1 million into it to refinance, or they're going to have to sell the asset.
And David, were some of those assets bought with very short-term debt,
All
like
of it
bridge
was.
loans? Yeah,
Yeah.
so the bills come and due.
And expensive debt. If you're looking at a real estate investment and they're, over 70% leverage at 2 points in and a 10% interest rate, I would highly suggest you not put money into that deal. Because number one, that sponsor doesn't have the credit to actually go to banks. So they're going to individuals that make money on high octane loans. So, and feel free to interrupt at any time. Yes. Yes, so when Robert was laying out the real estate life cycles, I would say that I'm mid-career. This will be, I graduated college in 2006, went through the GFC, not knowing what was going on, but still had a job. And I would say that cycle from 2012 to now is coming to an end.
Yeah.
But most of my holds, being a younger guy and needing the promote, a promote is what a sponsor makes as a percentage of profits when a deal is sold. I would say I underwrite most of my investments off of 2 to 3 year holds. So that would be if I buy 10 a year, 6 of them would be a 2 to 3 year hold. The other 4 would be assets that I'm keeping indefinitely. That way, it reduces volatility and I could manage cycles. But that would be a typical, I just bought 30 units in Encinitas and it's a 2 year hold. The reason why it's a 2 year hold is I bought it off market at a great basis. And, the sub location in Encinitas, is not, it's great. It's off of Saxony and Encinitas Boulevard, but I don't want to own a building next to a substation for 20 years. SDG&E substation. But someone else will.
This is a good time to
Yes.
talk.
Question for both. Robert mentioned about the cost of construction going up, rising interest rates, feel that. In California, there's seems to be rent control statewide.
Yes.
And to me, it sounds like that means if you're all a full-time property, and so does that mean going to be a lower or decline in value?
Do you want to?
Yeah,
Yeah, why don't you
so,
go
so some of it's already priced into the market because we've had that statewide rent control law for a while. And it's actually the existing law is fairly lenient. It allows us to raise rents more sharply than as an owner. I want to raise the rents. I don't feel good about putting out an 8 to 10% rent increase to tenants. We tend to temper it some. In certain conditions, if the rent's well below market, then yes, we'll do that. But we do have to take into account when properties sell, and we actually have a section in the program later on we're going to talk about. There's regulatory constraints on how we can raise the rents, and it's no longer if you're doing a major remodel, I've got one going on right now where we're replumbing the building, rewiring the building, installing air conditioning, putting in new windows, all new kitchens, all new baths. I mean, this is a soup to nuts. It's a lot of work. To do that, you need to vacate the building. And it's becoming far more difficult to vacate buildings. I got this building vacated 1 month before new rules kicked in, which would have made it a lot harder and a lot more expensive. Might have driven up the project costs to the point where you just don't want to do it anymore. And we're getting into that, where some of the remodels that were being done over the last 10 years are no longer penciling, in part because of increased regulatory costs.
Yeah, typically that's who I buy from. It's are
Yeah.
individuals who are tired of the political system.
So this is where David comes in, and I think it's the next slide, where he talks about who his investment partners are and why they invest with David rather than investing directly. I don't know if you want to jump into that
Yeah,
now.
it's a lot of work moving rent rolls. Increasing rents is probably there's a lot of headline risk, and I avoid the newspaper at all costs. I write significant checks to tenants to essentially replenish their checking accounts and
Moving incentives.
moving incentives, and then under the current rule of AB 1482, there's a clause underneath there called substantial remodeling. Essentially, if you do enough work to a building, a lot of these buildings need to be remodeled because the owner that owned it for 30 years was a slumlord. And if you actually walk inside the units, it's unbelievable with some of these living conditions. And they just need to be repiped. I mean, they leak like sieves. The electrical systems, they're one hair dryer away from catching on fire. And these individuals, although they don't want to move, but a lot of times, once you sit down and talk to them and say, hey, last year, how you had, 3 drywall removals for, your leaky sewer line. We're going through and putting all ABS into the building. And when I'm doing a renovation from a cost perspective, what slide are we on here? If you go back from the next slide. So the top the top left one is the Long Beach one. That renovation was $28,000 a door. The top right one, that was $55,000 a door, and that was in 2021. The top one was in 2018. My current one, I'm putting in $75,000 a unit. And I would say the spec of the renovation is increasing, but there is massive amounts of inflation in there, probably up to 30 to 40% of just cost.
I would love to be at 75,000 a unit. We're spending more on remodels in some cases than we did than what the building cost initially when we purchased the building.
Yes. It depends if the building's insurable. A lot of the buildings nowadays, you have your annual insurance inspection and you'll get canceled, flat canceled. And then
Okay.
you're going to California Fair Plan, and that's a different level of hell.
Okay, we've got the head of real estate for US Bank back there waving his hands because I know he has some experience with this. John?
Still a lot of older, like historic owners. And they have to think their property for years, accept that property and collect rents and have the garden will go, and that's it, which things. That is started, you guys all that, I've taken it in, that report.
Well, yeah, what happens is that individual essentially passes away and the heirs take over. And they understand what a reassessment of property taxes feel like when mom and dad didn't raise rents for the last 20 years.
One of the things we see with these older owners is they bought what was effectively a Volkswagen or a Honda Civic of its day, a Ray Huffman 1970s frame stucco box apartment building. You see them all over North Park, Normal Heights, Pacific Beach, Ocean Beach. And these were really fairly simple housing, good, sturdy, very usable, decent sized units. And that's the business that a lot of these older owners know. It's, well, of course it's a Formica countertop. Of course it's a fiberglass shower enclosure. You know, this is an apartment building. Of course I'm putting cheap fixtures into it. I'm putting apartment grade fixtures into it. And what they don't realize is there's a clientele out there that will pay $3,000 or more for a 2-bedroom or $2,400 for a 1-bedroom in North Park. If it's a 21st century unit with in-unit washer and dryer and air conditioning and a quartzite counter on top of new cabinets.
Black stainless steel, tiled bath surrounds.
And so there's your $75,000 plus a unit. And if you were to tell one of these older owners, number one, what rent you can get, they'd be in disbelief. But then they'd really have the heart attack when they would find out how much money renovators like us will put into a building.
Well, and
They would just think it's wasteful. Why are you spending all that money?
And if you're buying a Huffman, I can guarantee you're redoing the main sewer line and there's 45 amps at the sub panel. So you're redoing the electrical. Yes.
Since the GFC, we've seen all of this appreciation in multifamily and any other sectors of the real estate market. That's some correct.
Yeah. Yeah. The reason why I chose multifamily out of kind of the big 4 food groups, is multifamily, there's an inherent housing initiative nationwide. And that's driven by the federal government through the government sponsored entities, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, there's Ginnie Mae for single family homes. So when you have that large of a debt provider, that always has the faucet on, there's not as much volatility in multifamily. When you go to the other commercial asset classes, retail, office, and industrial, you're beholden to commercial banks, to life insurance, and who knows if their faucet is going to be on or not.
So David, I'd like to, I'm keeping my eye on the clock here. I'd like you to jump in, tell us a little bit about who your investors
Oh,
are.
sure.
You know, what type of person invests with you? And then I'd like to get into the, just run through the.
Yeah, the
underwriting
majority of my investors, I would say that I'm backed by 2, what you would call like real family offices. And then the other 7 would be high net worth individuals. All of them, and that's my lead stable. So they typically take up 90% of my capital stack, my equity raise. And the majority of them were all real estate professionals at some point in their career. And I call them war horses, you know, because they were working till their mid to late 60s, and now they're in their 70s. They don't want to swing hammers anymore, and they still want to be a part of the deal. And you know, they're a great group of investors to have because they act as a board of directors. If I face an issue, I could call, you know, investor Mike, and I know that he probably at one point in his career ran into the same issue. I have a couple friends and family, but not really. I'd say majority of them are old real estate professionals. And I run a different process. I don't do the large syndication subscriptions where I'm sending out PPMs. It's a simple LLC agreement that we've all hashed out, and I tie up a deal. My investment committee package goes to them in 3 days, and I'm raised typically in 7 days. And then I go out and find debt.
So in the real estate world, we'd say, and maybe in the investment world, what David offers, this is not an investment that's sold. This is an investment that's purchased. As I said, he's a niche player, bringing something special to the table. And in the real estate world, you have those people who act as intermediaries between more passive investors. There's also investments out there that are heavily promoted and sold where they've got a sales team and they're out, beating the bushes looking for that investment capital. But if you can find a niche player like this, they're just bringing more to the table in terms of value add component and understanding of the market niche. Speaking of that, maybe we roll on to the next slide. Yes. Okay. Next slide, Brandon. There we go. So we're going to quickly gloss over just a summary of what's done during due diligence. How does an investor, a private investor, go about finding a knowledgeable private investor who's a good niche player? How do they go about finding the investments? And what kind of due diligence do they do? So we're going to give you the high level, and then David's going to go into a deeper dive on some of the analysis. So, typically they're figuring out what niche they want to be in. That's the global. And real estate, we call it food groups. Going to be investing in industrial and warehouses, office buildings, or are we going to be in multifamily for the reasons that Dave specified? Then we start getting into market selection. So you came down here to San Diego because you covered it a little bit.
It's just a very young, dynamic market that has, that's not highly concentrated in one employment sector. It's a market where people come and never leave, and that is the best market. And when you have a finite amount of roofs that people can live under, the dynamics for appreciation go through the roof.
Then we talked about submarket selection. Do you want to be in the neighborhoods where you're chasing rents, or do you want to be in the neighborhood where the deposits are all coming in on the first, the rent payments? Years ago, Pete, you're from Chicago. I read an article with an investor from Chicago who was working gentrifying neighborhoods. And he said, my goal is to get into a neighborhood before Starbucks shows up. He goes, I want to invest in the next neighborhood Starbucks is going to expand into. I want to get there ahead of the young hipsters and then ride that wave up as the hipsters come in. So that's, one of the types of analysis you're doing, the demographic analysis, where are the jobs, transportation patterns. Then we get into the physical property assessment, actually looking at the buildings.
Yeah, when I do a physical due diligence, I have a team with me. I have 4 third-party consultants doing a physical inspection, an environmental. Now there is SB 271, where now you have to inspect balconies or any elevated elements to a building. So that guy will be on site. I typically do an earthquake analysis to figure out the PMLs. But those are a lot of niche analysis that most people don't do.
And do you bring a leasing agent, property management leasing agent to help confirm projected rents?
Correct. Yeah, I'll have my pro forma ready to go. I'll have my sales comps ready, my rent comps ready. My management team will then review everything and say, yeah, it looks good. Outside of that, I'll have all of my trades. I'll have my GC and my roofer, my flooring guy, my plumber, my electrician, HVAC, demo. They'll all be on site so by the time we leave after a couple hours, I'll have a full construction budget within 3 or 4 days.
Brandon, I think we can skip up 2 slides to the primary documents to review. Okay, and then obviously we're taking a good hard look at some of the books and records that go with the property, sales comps, rent comps. Sales comps, you've got the published closed transactions. But remember, when you're working with inside information, you're really knowledgeable about what's going on in the market. You're aware of what's come on the market, what's gone into escrow, and you might even have a sense for, even though it's not public information, where that property went into escrow, at what price point.
And also what credit. If a buyer closes with buyer credits, it records at the contract pricing. And that's big. Meaning if someone went under contract at 3 million and they got $500,000 in buyer's credit, that property really sold for $2.5 million. But public records show that it sold for 3 million.
Look down at the bottom of the slide under rent roll. We talk about, we're analyzing the existing rents. But then what are the market rents for that building in as is condition? And then if you go in and do your renovation, what kind of rents do you anticipate getting post renovation? And then, as we discussed earlier, what are the regulatory impediments to perform that renovation and get those post renovation rents? We talk about some more of the documents that are reviewed, but I think I'm going to kick it over to David. We're going to go to the next slide and let you get into the deeper dive.
Yeah, so many of you might recognize this as the Gordon growth model. It's essentially a month 13 cap rate. But you could see that you have your cash yield, which is similar to a bond yield. You have the growth, which is stimulated by what market you're participating in. And then you have cap rate movement, either compression, which we all like, or expansion, which is great buying opportunities. And what drives each of, the yield attributions. We kind of touched on a lot of them. The cash yield is driven by the P&L of the property, where you can move rents, how much you have to put into the property, because there's a numerator and a denominator. The growth, I'm a zip code snob, and I just like really great areas, and those are the areas that have the most growth. I grew up in Anaheim, California, and when my parents bought their home in 78, and if they would have bought a home in Newport Beach, California, the growth is completely different. And even though it's still Orange County, street corners make a difference when you're investing in real estate. And you got to be very particular on that. And then you have cap rate movements, and that's driven by capital flows, both from debt and investor equity. Touching back on the GSEs, that's huge. If the GSEs leave the multifamily market, we will see massive cap rate expansion. Fortunately, I don't think that will ever happen. GSEs, that's Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, government-sponsored entities. So you take this simple equation, and you can go to the next slide, and this is how I buy real estate. We're not going to dive too far into it because it's pretty sophisticated, but when I buy a deal, it's typically thoroughly analyzed.
So this is the advantage of having someone with that institutional investment experience, the CFA behind him. And it used to be extraordinarily rare to see someone bring this level of sophistication to the table in real estate. But as real estate values have gone up over the last 40 years, we've seen more and more sophisticated analysts get into the game, typically up at the institutional level, but here's someone who's bringing that level of sophistication into the world of private investment real estate.
You go to the next slide. Here's a quick case study. This is an asset I bought in Carlsbad. It was bought in the barrio, so just west of the 5. I purchased it from an older individual who was looking to upgrade their asset. They actually traded into a really nice 1990s quality, condo quality asset in University Heights. And the reason why she sold this building is the plumbing was failing. And I went through, put about $55,000 a door into it, vacated the whole building and repiped the whole building within a month, and then renovated it the following month, and then leased it within a couple months. It was a really short hold. I ended up selling it to an individual who sold 2 buildings in Bankers Hill, and he was upgrading his asset. He actually never even saw the asset. He lives in Bend, Oregon, and he FaceTimed me and we walked the building and he bought it, which is amazing for, an $8.5 million buy. Or what was it, 8.9, 9.3. Yeah. I guess my pro forma was 8.3, but this is, when you were talking about rent control and moving rents, we moved rents pretty significantly at this building, 70% from in place to where we stabilized at. And, the justification for that was if the building wasn't redone, you were going to have to scrape it. And at that time, the land was not worth much more than the improvement, so it needed a renovation. Any questions on kind of next page? Some before and after photos.
And one of the nice things about San Diego is we have been able to justify going in and renewing this old housing stock. And we tend to not see buildings fall to the wayside.
Well, we have to. It's too costly to build nowadays.
Yeah. You get into other markets, growth markets, land cheaper, it's less expensive to build. And you're more apt to have properties slide further and further down the food chain in terms of becoming slum-like. At times we hear the politicians complaining about the gentrification. In the 1990s, when we had a decade where rents were trending downwards, and we had 10% of the rental housing stock in San Diego County lost in foreclosure, city council members were all over us about the slum-like conditions and why isn't anyone renovating this housing stock? And it's because we couldn't get the rents to justify the renovation costs. And I think at times the politicians I wish they were a little more aware of the opposite of having your housing stock rejuvenated. They would complain less about the benefits that come from rejuvenating the housing stock.
Next slide, and we'll open it up to any questions you guys might have.
You can flip it, Brandon. There we go. Okay. Holly and then John.
It's 100% cheaper. Yeah, and a lot of the assets that I buy, on the OM it will say beautifully renovated, but going to Home Depot to the end cap and buying all the sales item and putting them into an apartment building is not beautifully renovated. And a lot of individuals will slightly rehab their building, but it's actually worth more to me for them not to do anything.
And I've handled so many transactions where the buyer gets in and the sellers told us about their renovations. And the buyer gets in and looks at me and says, I wish they hadn't done anything. Yeah, they spent $4,500 in this unit and it's all going in the dumpster because it's not well thought out. And I want to come in and create a cohesive designed environment for the tenant. And I can't do it with this piecemeal work that's been done. Now the seller has an expectation they're going to get a better price because they spent the money. And the buyer's like, nope, it's going in the dumpster. It's worth nothing to me. John? Okay,
There's not a lot of
we were talking about this before the meeting started. So right now there's 22 buildings on the market in Pacific Beach. That's a phenomenal amount of inventory. A lot of them are flips. They're properties that have been renovated. The people got in a few years ago, just as David was saying, and now they're having trouble getting out on the back end. Some of them are probably under some pressure from short-term debt. So something's going to happen there. But that buyer pool, that was our primary buyer pool, were these momentum players doing fix and flips. And their capital is tied up in deals they can't exit out of. So they're out of the market. So what's remaining, I see a much lower volume of investors coming in frequently with tech money. Their stock options have hit. I'll hear comments like, I hate to sell any of my company stock, but I've got X many million in options and I better start diversifying out of the company stock. I have one investor, the boy who grew up next door to me. He's been a tech multimillionaire 2 times. The first time was Peregrine Systems. It all went away. So this second time around, he's done extraordinarily well. And he's been gradually selling off some of that stock and making large down payments on apartments to diversify his asset base. So that's kind of typical of what we're seeing now. Glenn?
Yeah. So the 5, yeah. I'm looking at both. I'm chasing 2 deals in Pacific Beach right now, owned by the same seller. One of them will be a long-term hold because the functionality, even though they're built by the same developer, which is funny, one of them will be a long-term hold, the other one will be a commodity flip. I just don't like the layout of one of the assets.
What don't you like about the layout that causes you to think that's not a long-term hold? It's a shorter term.
It's an L-shaped building lacking a courtyard, and it's not as neighboring. It doesn't have a good feeling when you walk the building. Correct, because my end user won't be as picky as me. Like I could walk into a kitchen and say, this is a terrible kitchen because I have to put an 18-inch dishwasher in and not a full-size 24-inch.
Got a question over here?
Yeah, the ember zones are big, especially in central San Diego. Just the age of the building and lack of upgrades. One of my buildings was built in 1928. It has knob and tube wiring. It has cast iron. There's been no upgrades. I actually had a private market carrier who was willing to do it. But I knew when I was going to sell this building, my end user was going to need California Fair Plan. I bought the building in March. I went under contract in January. It took till May for Fair Plan to get back to me. And now it's under Fair Plan. It's the lead times for insurance. If you're buying real estate and you don't have your agent with you on day one, you're going to miss a closing. It's just very hard to get insurance.
And it's hard for existing property owners to keep their insurance. There's a lot of blacklisting going on based on electrical panels and sub panels. You know, some of the brands that were installed back in the 60s and 70s, the insurance companies don't want to touch until those sub panels are upgraded. So those are some expensive improvements you're having to do in order to keep your property eligible for insurance. We are seeing insurance costs. It is not at all unusual to hear owners who are paying triple what they were paying a year ago for insurance. And it's definitely impacting values as we sell these properties.
Rapid appreciation in real estate.
So, you know, part of it is the construction costs have gone up tremendously. We're talking about 50% plus increase in construction costs since the start of the pandemic. Some of that's going to come down. Right now, there's a buildup of lumber at the sawmills and in the yards. So your material prices are going to be dropping. And we're hearing that if you're planning construction 6 months out, you're going to be looking at lower costs, lower bids from your contractors because there's enough pullback. So some of it's rising construction costs. Some of it's difficulty of the insurance companies getting increases approved in California. I had one fellow who commented to me, oh, these greedy insurance companies, they're just gouging us. And I'm like, yeah, all these greedy insurance companies that are pulling out of state, they're leaving the state because they're making so much money here. There's something else going on. There was a question here. Bill, how are we doing on time? Okay. Anyone have a last question before we wrap up? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to Bill.
Hey, thank you all so much for coming. Fascinating presentation. Of course, you can see real estate experts here. And I think it's a challenge for all of us as, you know, in the planning arena, our clients who may love real estate and had gotten into real estate at different stages. It may have passed them by as far as the expertise that's needed in managing that real estate. And these are the folks that can help with that process. Certainly, I commend you to the Coastal Roots Farms website. They're doing great things, as all of our nonprofit spotlight folks are doing. Sonny Pion with the San Diego Rescue Mission is here. And just pointing you to the August 6th meeting of the council with Kim Kamen of Gresham Partners in Chicago, presenting on the multifamily office, an introduction to the family offices and the services that they provide. So thanks so much for coming.